I was told not to come to Christmas. 3 days later, the people they were trying to impress learned my name. The text came in at 8:17 a.m., 3 days before Christmas. Dad, don't come this year. Your sister's in-laws are elite. We don't want things to feel awkward. That was it. No. I'm sorry. No, we'll see you later. Just a quiet decision made without me. I stared at my phone longer than I should have. Not because I was surprised, but because a small, stubborn part of me had still hoped. I scrolled up through the family group chat. Photos of ornaments. My mother reacting with hearts. My sister, Claire, posting a screenshot of a crystal chandelier at her in-laws' estate. Champagne emojis. Applause. No one asked how I felt. No one checked if I was okay. My name is Nora Whitman, and this wasn't the first time I'd been edited out for convenience. I was the daughter who didn't photograph well next to ambition. The one whose life didn't impress strangers over dessert. I typed out 3 different replies. Deleted all of them. In the end, I sent one word. Understood. I placed my phone face down on the counter and waited for the familiar ache to arrive, the one that usually followed moments like this. It didn't. What I felt instead was something colder. Clearer. They weren't protecting the holiday. They were protecting an image. That night, as snow dusted the windows and my city went quiet, I poured myself a cup of tea and wrapped my hands around the mug. I wasn't angry. I wasn't crying. I just knew one thing with certainty. I wouldn't be at Christmas. But Christmas wasn't done with me yet. I grew up understanding, without anyone ever saying it out loud, that I was the quiet option. Claire, my older sister, was the one people noticed. She spoke confidently, dressed sharply, and knew exactly how to charm a room. Teachers praised her. Relatives remembered her milestones. My parents repeated her achievements like credentials at a networking event. Claire didn't just succeed, she performed success. And my family loved her for it. I learned early that I wasn't built for performance. I did well in school, but quietly. I chose a career that made sense to me, not one that impressed dinner guests. I didn't post promotions. I didn't decorate my life with visible proof. When my parents asked what I was doing, they listened politely, then asked Claire a follow-up question instead. It wasn't cruelty. It was comparison. At holidays, conversations floated past me. Someone would ask Claire about her job, her travels, her plans. I'd be asked if I was still doing the same thing. If I nodded, the topic changed. If I explained, eyes glazed over. It became easier to stop explaining. By the time Claire started dating her now husband, the pattern hardened. His family had connections. Money. Names people recognized. Suddenly, everything revolved around presentation. What would look good? Who should be seen? Who fit? And I didn't. I wasn't rebellious or resentful. I adapted. I showed up when invited. I stayed quiet when overlooked. I told myself that love didn't need applause to be real. That my parents loved me in their own way, even if it was softer, conditional, easier to forget. But somewhere along the way, I realized something uncomfortable. They weren't disappointed in me because I failed. They were disappointed because I didn't impress. And in my family, that mattered more than truth. I carried that understanding with me into adulthood until the Christmas they finally said it out loud. Christmas arrived anyway. I watched it happen from the quiet distance of my apartment, through filtered photos and carefully chosen captions. My mother posted the table, first long, polished, set with linen so crisp it looked untouched. Gold-rimmed china. Crystal glasses catching the light. A caption about family, tradition and new beginnings. Claire shared more. Always, Claire. A slow pan of the living room at her in-laws' estate, vaulted ceilings, a tree tall enough to scrape the second floor, wrapped gifts arranged like a display instead of something meant to be opened. Someone off-camera laughed, the sound effortless and confident. This was the Christmas they wanted. No mismatched chairs. No awkward silences. No one who didn't fit the story. I could almost hear my father explaining me away before anyone asked. Nora's busy this year. Or worse, Nora wouldn't feel comfortable here. At home, my Christmas was smaller. A string of lights I'd hung myself. A simple meal. snow pressing softly against the windows like it didn't want to intrude. I ate slowly, not out of sadness, but because for the first time there was no pressure to be anything. I realized something then that surprised me. They hadn't excluded me to hurt me. They'd excluded me to curate. This holiday wasn't about closeness. It was about atmosphere. About aligning themselves with people who reflected the version of success they wanted others to see. I didn't ruin that image, but I didn't enhance it either. So I was removed. As the night deepened and the city went quiet, my phone stayed face down on the table. No missed calls, no last-minute invitations. Just confirmation. This was the Christmas they chose. And for the first time, I understood exactly where I stood in it. There was a truth about my life that my family never knew, not because I hid it, but because they never asked. They assumed silence meant smallness. That if something mattered, I would announce it. That if I were doing well, it would be obvious. In our family, value was measured by visibility, and I had never learned to live loudly. What they didn't know was that my work had grown far beyond the tidy explanations I gave at holidays. What started as a quiet role turned into long nights, then into responsibility, then into trust. I didn't chase titles, but I accumulated something more fragile and more powerful: decision-making authority. I was careful with it. Not out of secrecy but out of habit. When you grow up learning that attention is conditional, you learn to keep the important parts of yourself protected. There were moments I almost told them. When my father asked, half joking, if I ever planned to move up. When my mother suggested I could use a more impressive trajectory. I could have corrected them. I could have explained. But why? They weren't curious. They were checking boxes. They wanted reassurance that I fit somewhere they could describe easily to other people. And I didn't, so I kept my answers short. I let them believe I was stable, unremarkable, safe to overlook. It was easier than watching their interest flicker only when something sounded impressive enough to repeat. What they never realized was this: they didn't ignore my success. They ignored me. They never noticed when my work started shaping rooms I wasn't in. When my name carried weight without needing to be spoken aloud. When decisions moved because I said so quietly, without ceremony. By the time they decided I wasn't suitable for Christmas, the truth was already well beyond them. They just didn't know it yet. From what I learned later, the shift in the room happened before anyone understood why. The Christmas dinner was already in full swing at Claire's in-laws' estate. Wine had been poured. Laughter moved easily between people who spoke the same social language. My parents were relaxed in a way I rarely saw, my mother glowing with approval, my father leaning into conversations about investments and connections, eager to belong. Then the door opened again. At first, no one paid much attention. Another arrival wasn't unusual in a house like that. But the couple who stepped inside didn't behave like the others. They didn't scan the room for status. They didn't rush to greet the hosts or announce who they were. They moved with quiet confidence. Well-dressed, but not showy. Polite, but not eager. The kind of presence that didn't demand attention and yet slowly collected it. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Someone straightened their posture. Someone else lowered their voice. Claire's mother-in-law hesitated, unsure whether she should already know them. Claire smiled too quickly, trying to place their faces. My parents exchanged a glance, curious now, slightly tense. Introductions were attempted. Names were exchanged. And still the air felt off. This wasn't a social call. The man glanced around the room as if confirming something, then checked his watch, not impatiently, just precisely. The woman smiled, calm and observant, as though she already understood the dynamics unfolding in front of her. Someone asked how they knew the family. The answer came easily. "Oh," the woman said pleasantly, "we were invited to stop by." "By whom?" There was a pause. Just long enough to matter. "We're here because of Nora." The name landed awkwardly in the room, familiar, but out of place. Claire frowned. My mother stiffened. My father blinked, certain he'd misheard. "Nora?" Someone repeated. The couple nodded, unbothered. "Yes," the man said. "She thought it would be appropriate for us to meet everyone tonight. In the Fations, Ader. In the Fations, Town and Otter no." And just like that, the Christmas they had curated so carefully began to tilt slowly, unmistakably toward something none of them had planned for. For a moment, no one spoke. The name Nora hung in the air like it didn't belong there, too ordinary, too quiet for a room built on spectacle. My mother recovered first, forcing a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said carefully. "I think there's been some confusion. Nora couldn't make it this year. Thank you for watching." The woman smiled back, unoffended. "Yes. We know." The man set his glass down, his tone calm but exact. "We weren't invited by the hosts. We were invited by her." Claire laughed softly, the kind of laugh people use when they want to smooth something over. "My sister? That doesn't make sense." "It does," the woman replied. "If you know what she does." Silence tightened the room. My father leaned forward, suddenly alert. "And what exactly is it you think my daughter does?" The man glanced at his partner, then back at the table. "She's the primary decision-maker on the account your family has been courting for months." That was when the room shifted. Someone's hand froze halfway to their drink. Claire's husband straightened, color draining from his face. His parents exchanged a sharp look, recognition dawning, unwelcome and unmistakable. "That's not possible," Claire said quickly. "There must be a mistake. Actions of formain de start haste." "There isn't," the man said, gently. "We report to her. All final approvals go through Nora Whitman." My mother's smile collapsed. "Nora works quietly," she said, as if that explained everything. "She's never mentioned." "No," the woman interrupted, still kind. "She wouldn't. She doesn't need to." The realization arrived unevenly, like cold spreading through water. Conversations from earlier boasting, assumptions, exclusions replayed themselves in people's minds, now carrying weight. Claire's voice dropped. "You're saying my sister controls?" "Yes," the man said. "The partnership, the funding, the timeline." He paused, then added. "And she suggested we come tonight because she believed it was important we understand the environment around the family." My father looked stunned. My mother looked embarrassed. Claire looked like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "And where is she now?" someone asked quietly. The woman smiled again, softer this time. "She chose not to come." No one laughed. No one moved. Because in that moment, it became painfully clear. The person they had excluded wasn't beneath the room. She was the reason the room mattered at all. The shift didn't happen all at once. At first, there was disbelief, people murmuring that it must be exaggerated, that there had been a misunderstanding. Then came the recalculations. Who had said what? Who had been listening? Who might repeat it later? By the time dessert was served, the room felt smaller. Phones appeared in hands that hadn't touched them all night. Claire disappeared into the hallway with her husband, voices low and urgent. My parents sat rigid at the table, suddenly careful with every word, as if the evening had become a performance they no longer controlled. I wasn't there to see any of it. I only felt it later, through the sudden flood of messages. My mother called first. I let it ring. Then my father. Then Claire. Texts followed, stacked apologies without substance. "We didn't mean it like that. You know how your sisters-in-laws are. We were just trying to avoid awkwardness." The word awkward did a lot of work. By morning, the tone shifted. History began to rewrite itself. My parents suggested the decision had been mutual, that I'd chosen to stay home. That they'd assumed I preferred quiet holidays. Claire tried a different approach. "We should talk," she wrote. "Family shouldn't be divided over misunderstandings." But nothing about this was misunderstood. They hadn't misjudged my schedule. They'd misjudged my worth. And now that it had become visible to the wrong people, they wanted to contain the damage. I didn't respond. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. They weren't reaching out because they finally saw me. They were reaching out because someone else had, and it frightened them. That was the part they couldn't undo. By the end of the week, the calls slowed. The apologies softened into silence. And in that quiet, something settled into place. For the first time, I wasn't being edited back into the family story. I was choosing whether I belonged in it at all. What followed wasn't explosive. It was quieter than that and far more permanent. Invitations stopped coming with assumptions attached. No one hinted that I should fix anything or smooth things over. The tone had changed. Careful. Measured. As if everyone had suddenly realized that access to me was no longer guaranteed, the partnership my sisters-in-laws had been pursuing stalled. Not because I intervened but because trust had shifted. People noticed how quickly my absence had been justified. How easily I had been dismissed. It raised questions no one could answer comfortably. I was asked, indirectly, if there was anything I needed. If I felt supported now. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't retaliate. I didn't explain. I didn't offer reassurance. I simply continued as I always had, professionally, quietly, on my own terms. Boundaries, I learned, don't need to be dramatic to be effective. They only need to be consistent. I answered emails that required answers. I declined conversations that existed only to restore someone else's sense of control. My parents adjusted, slowly. Claire kept her distance, unsure which version of me she was allowed to speak to now. The one she'd overlooked or the one everyone else suddenly respected. Neither version was fully accessible anymore. Because access isn't a right. It's a result. And the people who only notice your value once it becomes useful don't get automatic entry into your life no matter what title they share with you. For a long time, I believed there was something about me that needed correcting. That if I spoke louder, achieved more visibly, or shaped my life into something easier to explain, my family would finally relax around me. I mistook their discomfort for disappointment and carried it like a quiet failure. But Christmas changed that, not because the truth came out, but because I finally understood it. I was never the embarrassment. I was simply inconvenient to a narrative that valued appearance over substance. They didn't exclude me because I lacked worth. They excluded me because my worth didn't serve them until someone else recognized it. And that distinction matters. I don't need revenge. I don't need validation from people who only look up once the room tells them to. What I needed was clarity. And I have it now. I choose who gets proximity to my life. Who hears my plans. Who benefits from my presence. That choice no longer belongs to tradition, or guilt, or shared last names. This Christmas didn't teach me who my family is. It taught me who I am when I stop asking to be included. And that version of me doesn't wait for invitations. Before you go, I want to speak to you not as a character in a story, but as someone who has lived this moment. If you've ever been excluded, minimized, or quietly pushed aside because you didn't fit the image, I hope you know this: your value does not begin where other people finally notice it. You don't owe anyone performance, proof, or permission to be worthy. Support isn't love if it only appears when your success becomes useful. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever been underestimated by the people closest to you? Your voice matters here. And if this story gave you clarity, strength, or even a little courage, please consider supporting the channel. Like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. We're building a space where quiet strength is seen and respected.